As I was telling Din Hickey at the beginning of the session, I'm hiding in my husband's office. He actually works from home all the time because my kids are at home. So I understand if you have interruptions in the background. So don't worry about it. But that's why I mute everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again with you guys. And whenever we start any lesson, and some of these are principles that really are effective teaching principles, regardless of whether we teach online or not, right? So, but it is different in how purposeful we have to be when we're introducing and talking to our students. So I've been teaching online now for 6 years. And it definitely was, I've been teaching for 26 years, but this is my 6th year at the university. And when I started, it was really, truly like being a first-year teacher all over again after 20 years of teaching. So keep that in mind. Don't get frustrated with yourself. Know that it is normal to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm a first-year teacher, first-year instructor again. So keep that in mind. Be patient with yourself. Give yourself grace. So the first thing we really need to do is, set those goals and those the purpose for the course for the students to understand. And again, keeping in mind that they might be doing this on their own time and not with you present online. So we have to be very clear. Our expectations need to be very clear. So the goal of this session is to understand some principles of effective online learning by exploring some instructional strategies that promote standards-based and student-driven learning. And I say student-driven learning because I'll tell you, I'm a former school principal, and I always told my teachers, if we're doing all the thinking, we're driving the instruction, if we're driving all the instruction, we're doing all the thinking. So it's really important that we give students the opportunity, especially adult students, to take ownership of the learning. And then we're gonna hopefully establish an online community where we can share ideas to improve the quality of online education. So with online, always start with the beginning, with the end in mind. And we hear that all the time if you heard of Kobe, his work and all that. But really online, that's really, really important because they need to understand, what am I working towards? Like if you're building on content that they're going to have to use for a major project at the end, for a final exam, whatever you want them to do at the end, it's really important that they understand that from the beginning. And I'll give you some examples of that in a minute. So today, I want you to identify instructional strategy that you can implement in your online courses. So I'm starting from the beginning. I'm telling you from now, please pay attention so that you at the end be able to identify a strategy. And then this strategy should be selected with the goal of improving the content or the current courses, or creating new courses that allow students to take ownership of their own learning. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go through the 45 minutes or 30 minutes that we have together. And same thing online, always make sure that they know, why am I doing this? Why are you sharing this information with me? So right now I'm telling you from the beginning, this is why I'm sharing this information. This is what's expected. So these are some ideas and ways that I start with the beginning, with the end in mind. I begin with the end in mind. So the syllabus, of course, we all have syllabus, right? We all have to create our syllabi and set the expectations. But I also have an assignment schedule for them. On top of just a regular, week 1, whatever we're going to cover in the dates. The assignment schedule, and I'll share with you in a minute, it actually has the modules, when I'm going to open them, when is it due, so that they know. Like I generally open them a week, 2 weeks advance and ahead before the due date, so that they know, because all of my students are classroom teachers. They're actually teaching, getting their master's in education. So I know that they're working and their schedule is very difficult. So I want to make sure that they understand from the beginning, this is what the schedule is and this is how it's set up. And then again, I mentioned this already, make sure that you have clear expectations about how the content you're covering is going to build towards a culminated project or a final exam. So this is an example of the assignment schedule I provide. In all my classes that I teach, I have a schedule like this. When is the module going to open? When is the discussion board? If there's a discussion board, when is it going to be? When do they have to post their first discussion board? And when do they have to come back and respond? The discussion board, and I'll talk more about this, but since I have this up, I found, you'd go through this and learn different things, but I found my first year, perhaps maybe a year and a half, that if I gave them just one due date, they would wait until the night before or the night it was due and post all their comments that day. And then, so the same students kept participating. And then the ones that were posting at the last minute were just responding to a couple, but really wasn't a discussion. So by giving them 2 due dates, I really forced them to get engaged earlier than the night before or the day it's due. So generally it's a Thursday when they have to go post their original post. And then they had to come back before that Sunday and respond to 3 other colleagues and make any final post that they want to be considered for grading. So that has really increased or improved the quality of their participation because they know they can't wait until the last minute to submit. So it's not just a checklist thing. And some of them, you know how it is. Some of them will post just to post, but for the majority of them are really doing a better job at participating. I also set clear expectations from the beginning regarding assignments that might build as the semester goes. So they know that at the end, they have to submit a full reflection journal. So I give them specific information or specific guidelines of this is how you're going to do it. You're going to write 2 or 3 paragraphs after you read every chapter, and then you're going to submit that as a full paper at the end of when we finish reading that book. So again, make sure that they have clear expectations and that they know what's expected at the end. And this is another one that I use with them. It's this one is making connections. So instead of writing a reflection after each chapter, they actually have to create like a concept map, and they have to add to the concept map as the semester progresses so that we can see how they're reflecting, how they're using the information, making connections. Again, giving them ownership of their learning and making them responsible for making those connections as they learn the content. And then they just submit. I tell them, just take a picture. Like they're like, do I need to type it and make it print? I said, no, this is your learning. I don't want it I truly want it on, I want to see what you created. So whatever works. So some people use some sort of software. Other people use just, a piece of paper and create a concept map. And I share with them a copy of a concept map that I created. So it's really all about giving them that, the expectations from the beginning, so it's not a surprise. And then they're not like, when the concept map is due, they're like, oh, I don't have a concept map. Well, I've told you from the beginning that you will be expected to do this. So clear expectations from the beginning, starting to make connections and help them do that. The other thing with online education, and especially at this time, is to create that foster that sense of community. We all know we are living in really unprecedented times, and it's sometimes difficult with everything we have going on. So discussion boards are a great way of doing that, and I would suggest that you break them into smaller groups. Like I had generally my classes it depends, but I've taught classes as big as 70 students. I have some that are 30, but even in with those 30 students, I break them into small groups. So they only have 4 or 5 students per group so that they really have a support system. Everybody, there's always somebody that says, well, so-and-so is not participating. So I tell them, I said, you need to reach out to that student and see how can you, engage them, solve your own problems, right? But of course, if the student is not participating, and I know that because I'm monitoring, right? If the student is not participating, then I'll reach out to them. But create that sense of community so that they know that they're not out there on their own. They're not just a number, right? They're actually students that we know and get to know their names. which is part of why I always make them introduce themselves, have some sort of, the first module is always some sort of activity where they tell us about themselves and why they're taking the course, and just like you would do in a face-to-face class, but make sure that they do it online. And there's multiple ways of doing that, right? So the resources that I want to share is, of course, Google Classrooms or Google everything, Google Drive. They can participate there. They can, I allow them to, or give them opportunity to create. Sometimes I give them the opportunity to choose how they're going to participate. So once they're in a group, I let them choose how they're going to participate. Are you going to create a video with your group, Zoom, and send me that video? Or are you going to post your comments on the discussion board? So Google Classrooms have a lot of resources. It's many of the tools for Google are free. Gives a lot of opportunities to collaborate in group assignments. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. Flipgrid is another tool that is great. It's free. What I like about Flipgrid and what it helps me make the classes more interactive is that they actually limit the length of the video. So it's basically a discussion board, and you set up a prompt. It's 90 seconds, and then they have to respond, and then you have a bunch of short videos that they have to listen to and respond to. So it's a discussion board, but it's a video discussion board. So they're not having to type their answers. They're just recording a 90-second video of their responses. My daughter is in 6th grade, so she's 11, and they do this. They've been using this online. They also have, of course, the regular discussion boards that you have access to in Moodle. I'm not very familiar with Moodle, but I'm assuming there's some sort of where they can actually collaborate and work on group assignments on there. So that's, again, another way of fostering that sense of community and making sure that they know they're not learning alone. And then Zoom. Of course, Zoom is a great tool. I would encourage you to use Zoom as often as you can, right? To for them to know that you're there, and not always as a whole group. Like if you guys were in one of my classes, I might set up different time for Zoom meetings for different groups, small groups, so that you can address the needs of the students. And sometimes you have to Zoom one-on-one with a student. So because just like they would come into your office because they're struggling, you can do this via Zoom as well. I want you to be thinking about questions you might have. I don't like to lecture this long, but feel like we don't have a lot of time. So I want to share as much as I can and then give you a chance to ask questions if you have. And then when we're talking about discussion boards, it's really, I feel very strongly about not having whole group discussion boards. My only whole group discussion board is the introduction board, where I see who's in my class, where I get to know them, and then I group them. Either I want a variety of people in a group, or I want all the people that are in, let's say, health science to be in a group, or all the engineers in a group. So you purposely, either depending on the content of your course, either create homogeneous or heterogeneous groups where there's diversity in your groups. But I found that having small group discussions really encourage more really effective discussion about the content. They hold each other accountable, and with Zoom you can record those videos, and I mentioned that earlier. I give them a choice. So once they're in small groups, and I set very clear expectations of what they're supposed to be doing in those groups. So once I break them up into groups, I tell them you have to post by Thursday, right? Your original post, and then have a conversation by Sunday night. Respond to your colleagues, come back and respond to your own post. Or they can let me know and say, by Thursday, tell me, we're not posting written comments because we're going to Zoom. And the small group Zooms and then record it and uploads it as their assignment. So they don't, they have that choice, because I want them to feel like they're responsible for their own learning, and I'm not. They're adults. They can choose how they're going to complete this assignment. And foster a sense of community, you have to be present. And Dr. Hickey will talk about being present and really offering effective customer service to our students. But as somebody that has had classes that are really large, it's impossible for me to respond to every single discussion board, but I go and, very strategically respond to discussion boards. It might be every day, it might be every other day. Like I take, 15, 20 minutes and read and make sure that I respond to some so that they can see that I'm on there. Even if I'm not reading every single one of them, they get the sense that I'm looking, that I'm really paying attention to what they're saying by responding to a few comments every day or every other day. The other thing that I would say about being present, and I'm sure Dr. Hickey might talk about this, is if you're swamped, and we are all swamped at some point, right? We don't have time to go grade this right now. I always make sure that I tell the students, hey, thank you so much for submitting your assignment. I'm falling behind on my schedule. I will get to your assignment as soon as I can. So make sure that, just tell them that. Linmara, you have a question? Sorry. There we go.
Yeah. Just going back to the discussion boards and breaking them into small groups.
Yes.
Like how many people would be good for one of those small groups?
I usually try to limit it to 5. Most of them are 4 students. But if I have a class that's large and I'm like, I don't want to have 50 groups, so I might do 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. And by the way, I don't know if you guys, especially the ones that are new to Zoom, there's a feature on Zoom where you can actually, if we were all together here and I wanted to break you into smaller groups while we're all online, there's a breakout room feature on Zoom that you can set up. You have to go to the website on your account and set it up. And then once you're on Zoom, it'll allow you to break out into groups. So you can really, and then you as an instructor can go from one group to the other to check on their work. Okay, so the other thing is ownership of their learning. And again, this is one thing that I feel very strongly about, is that they have ownership of their own learning. And when I say that, think about, what do you learn from the most? Do you learn from other people's experience, or do you learn from your own experiences? I personally learn from my own experiences. I wish I could learn from other people's experiences, right? But they learn from their own experiences. So it's important that we allow them to have the experiences where they're the ones doing the thinking. As I mentioned earlier, when I was a school principal, before coming to UT Tyler, I would tell my teachers, I said, I went into your classroom and you're doing all the thinking. Like, if you're doing all the thinking, what are the students doing? Like, we spent a lot of time. Like, I had one teacher tell me one time, that was a great lesson. I said, yeah, it was a great lesson. You clearly know your stuff. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I didn't see any students demonstrating their learning. I didn't see any students actually thinking. You were doing all the thinking. So no wonder this teacher would leave and be exhausted. We're all exhausted as teachers, right? But he was, particularly, like, he's like, I don't know that I can do this. I said, you're the only one working. You're the only one doing the thinking. So it's really important that we find ways to allow our students to do the thinking. So what I do is my role is to give them the resources that they need to learn the content, and then give them tasks where they're going to have to apply the content. So I don't generally, like, all my lectures or my modules might have at the most 15-minute video where I talk to them about whatever content. And if it's 15 minutes, I actually split into 2 videos, so no more than 7 minutes each video, because we all know we get tired of listening to people talk, right? So, like, I keep looking at my watch and thinking, oh my gosh, I've been talking for, 20 minutes now. So, and it's because I don't want you to feel like, okay, I'm done listening to her, right? So the same thing with our students. They don't want to listen to us for 45 minutes. They really learn from applying the content that you're teaching them. So what I do is I make sure that I provide the readings, videos, websites, resources that are easy for them to access, and then give them a task. you're going to use this information and you're going to apply it this way. So give them ownership of their learning. Let them do the thinking. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Making connections, which I shared earlier, where they are actually making connections and creating. That's a simple assignment and students love it, where they're actually reading the content and having to create that concept map to help them organize their thoughts. That's a simple assignment and they love it because they're reflecting on what they're learning and how it's changing their understanding of the concept. I teach a principalship course where they're actually having to develop a campus improvement plan. And it would be really easy for me to say, these are all the resources here, go develop a campus improvement plan. But I tell them, these are the things that you need to create an improvement plan. And then they have to go back to their schools and really identify where are these resources. So I don't just give them everything. I do make sure that when I tell them that they're, resources that are accessible to them. But I make sure that they're the ones responsible for understanding and finding out the resources that they need. And where do I find them? Because when they become principals or when they become nurses or psychologists, you're not going to be there telling them, oh, this is the resource you can use now. No, they need to learn where they find those resources. So, that's one thing I do. I give them an assignment with expectations, but then I leave it open enough where they have to find some of those resources and implement them. And then best practices is another one where I have best practices for curriculum. I have them go interview people doing the work so that they can learn and find resources within the context in which they're going to work. And because mine are all teachers working as, they're all already teachers, they have those resources available to them. Undergrad students might be different because they might not have those resources. But if you let them, help them make those connections with practitioners so that, again, they're taking ownership of their own learning. And I made this comment a couple of times, have them take ownership. Make sure that the resources that you ask them to use are easy to access. Like I always make sure that they don't have to pay for things that I am wanting them to research or videos that I want them to see, websites that I want them to go visit. I make sure that those are all free and easy for them to access. And avoid busy work. We all know that I truly believe that busy work, when I create something that's going to take them a lot of time, but really not a lot of thinking, I do a lot of the thinking. I do a lot of the work ahead of time because I want them to do this. So let's say I'm writing a test and it's a multiple choice test and it has 50 questions. I'm doing all the thinking ahead of time. So I make sure that the work I assign is work that it's challenging, it's relevant to what they're learning, but it's not something that is just going to take them a long time. It's something that's going to require them to think deeply about what they're learning. And then balance between individual work and group work. And what I try to do is, if there's generally try to do like group work for formative evaluation, so I can get a sense of where they are and how they're progressing and mastering the content, and then do more of the individual work for the summative evaluation to see what do they master. Especially online, when you do, like when I first started, I was like, you know what, they're all going to develop a campus improvement plan. I was so proud of that project. And then I was at home grading and my husband is like, why are you complaining? You're the one that gave them the assignment. I said, it's taking me forever. And he said, well, why do you have 35 students creating a different improvement plan? So I required that assignment to be a group assignment, not only for my sanity, but really, if you think about it, there's not a principal out there that's going to work on improvement plan on their own. They have to work with their team. So I make sure that they are put in the situation similar to what it's reality. They're not going to be working on certain things on their own. We live in a society where we work with others. So I try to do that. If it's a one-on-one or an individual assignment, I make sure it's something that it's truly individual. But if it's a task that they need to master and know how to do, and in the real world, it will be on a group project, then I assign it as a group project. Okay, so the closing activity, because I want to give you time for questions, is to think about, and using the chat, think about the things I've shared today, and type in the chat at least one strategy that you can implement immediately or immediately implement in your courses. You should be able to see the chat on the bottom. Somebody, I don't know what you see on your side since I'm sharing my screen, but you should be able to see the chat feature. So please type on the chat one strategy that you plan on using. Yeah, small groups really, it really changed the way I did this. Like when I first started, I didn't want to do discussion boards because I'm like, oh my gosh, reading through this is so painful. And when you have a long, we have a large group, you, they start repeating themselves. And then, you know, somebody told me, why don't you break them into small groups? And it's changed the way I think about that. Yes, I will send this presentation to everybody. And anything, and I'll give you my email, but make sure feel free to email me if you have any questions. If I can share any of my resources, I'll be happy to share those with you. Lynn-Mara?
Yeah, I was wondering about again, going back to the discussion groups, as you said, how do you go about grading them? Because currently what we do is we have them all create the original discussion, the responses, but it's an individual assignment, and we have like 70 students in one online class. It gets, it's exhausting to mark.
Yes, so what I do is discussion boards, as the semester goes through, their participation grade. Like if you participate, and they're very low value, so they participate, they get a grade. Just like if you go to class every day, you're not gonna get a grade for just being there, right? Other than attendance, perhaps. But so I generally just do participation. But then if there's one that I tell them, I'm gonna be looking for the content, and you're going to earn certain number of points based on the content of your post. I give them specific, you know, you go ahead and post, and then I'm going to grade your final post. So they can change based on the discussion. And the purpose of doing that is for them to really engage in a discussion and perhaps develop their understanding of the concepts based on that discussion they have with their classmates. And then that's the last one they post is the one I grade. And some of them said, I didn't change my opinion. My original post is still what I believe. So that's what I grade. But generally, I give them discussion, like participation. I have a percentage of my course be participation.
So in that case, so long as they do it, they're getting like a 1 or 2 or however many points for just doing it, basically.
Yeah, basically. And that's so, but I tell them they have to post by Thursday. If they post after Thursday, they don't get the participation points, because then they're just doing it to do it and not really to engage in conversation with their colleagues. So they have to post by Thursday and participate and respond to the other colleagues by Sunday. Yeah. So Zoom is free. I'm answering some of the questions here. Zoom is free. It has some features that, like larger groups and all that, when the university pays for it, but just basic small group, maybe 25, and a limit of 45 minutes per session, it's free. I will send you the PowerPoint. I'll probably just send everything to Dr. Palma and let her send it out to those that have participated. So the other thing that I want to do is make sure we establish our community, and you really know that the faculty at UT Tyler, especially Dean Hickey and I, have a really heart for Belize. We've been going for years, and he said to the Toledo district, but have lately started to do some work with the ministry in the city as well. So Belize is I'm from Puerto Rico, so it's like I found another home at home, away from home in Belize. So this quarantine, the hardest part was I had to cancel my 3 trips to Belize. I had one in May. No, 2. I had one in May and one in June. And that was that. Really, I was so upset. So being home, it's okay, but not being able to go to Belize was really upsetting to me. So please write down my email address. Feel free to email me anytime. I'm a workaholic, so I'm always online at some point checking my email. Just yesterday or the day before, the dean asked me, "Do you ever take a day off?" I said, "Well, I didn't work on Saturday." So any other, yes, I want to invite you before I see if there's any other question. I want to invite you to COBEC. If you're familiar with COBEC, COBEC is the Consortium for Belize Educational Cooperation, Collaboration, something like that. So we are hosting, UT Tyler is hosting the conference this summer because of what's going on. It's free and it's going to be online. So we have sessions about online teaching. We'll have sessions for librarians, sessions on learning styles. How do you address learning styles when you're working with adults? Just partnerships that we have and other COBEC institutions have with Belize institutions. So it's free. Hopefully you can join us. We will send the information to register to Dr. Palma so she can share that with you. Okay, so the next session starts in 15 minutes. So I want to give anybody else has any other questions they want to ask. I'm gonna look. Mr. Olivera, go ahead. Mr. Fermin, I can see you raising your hand, but I don't hear you. Let me see.
Yes, hello. You can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, sorry about that. Yeah, I think it's a situational for us. Mm-hmm. But what I find myself spending enormous amounts of time trying to manage. Of course, there's my courses. Mm-hmm. There is of course, it's a transition. It was towards the end of the semester, but I wanted a good ballpark figure about how much of your time it will take, either weekly or whatever. I don't know. Just a figure to maybe at least to manage one course, because from what I am seeing right now, which I have to think it's circumstantial, but if this is the way it's going to be, my God, what time will I go to bed?
Yes, that is true. And yeah, I think especially because they're reaching out to you whenever they have access to the internet, or whenever they put their kids to bed and they, have time to work on their classes. It feels like you're always working and always teaching. So yes, it is time consuming, a lot more time consuming than preparing for a face-to-face class, because you have to, find the resources and post them and all that. But I would really encourage you to let students know, hey, I'm going to check. It depends on your group, of course, of who you're working with. But I tell them, I won't respond to your emails or your messages as quickly after a certain amount of, like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, because I have kids. So I need to make sure that I'm taking care of my kids. And on weekends, I will check my email, but I won't check it. I'll check it once or twice a weekend, which it's not true. I check it all the time, but I don't set that as an expectation. But yes, it is very time consuming. And which is why I always say, look for resources, create a task for them to complete so they're doing their own learning. Don't try to just turn your face-to-face class into an online class just the way you have it. Make sure you give them a lot of the ownership of their own learning.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
It does take a long time. Yes. And don't make the mistake I made when I recorded the videos. So on Zoom, I'm sure the ones that have been using it, you can open a Zoom meeting by yourself and record it and use that as your video to share with them. Yes. And Dr. Sokoski, Dr. Stacy will be talking about that at you're an hour earlier, so at 11. So you can share those videos. Don't make the mistake I made. Like, I wanted my videos to be perfect. So I would edit for hours until I said, you know what, forget it. This is who I am. Do I say too many times? Probably. But I got to the point that I'm like, I just can't edit and make everything perfect. So, which is hard for me, but something that you have to just accept.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, but it does take a long time. And you miss your face-to-face.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else? Let me see. Do you outline that in writing? Do I outline what in writing? Somebody asked on here if I outline Crystal.
I'm asking if you outline the time that you actually check your emails to the students.
So I generally do tell them I'll check, because of especially with my semester, the way it works is all my students are teachers. So I know they're not going to be online during the day. But I tell them, yes, I'll check my email until probably 6 o'clock. And then if you email me after 6, I might respond immediately or, as soon as possible. If not, I'll respond in the morning. But yeah, I tell them general, even though they're working, I work, regular hours as well.
Well, my question is that if you put it in the course outline or in writing,
yes,
so that they have it.
Yes, on my syllabus, I do put expectations as far when they should expect to hear from me and when I'm available. And you should also, I encourage you to also have like online office hours and say, hey, I'm going to be online at this Zoom meeting every Wednesday at whatever, 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. And they can just come in. And Zoom lets you set up a waiting room so that if you're Zooming with somebody and somebody else wants to join and it's during your office hours, you can let them know, I'm talking to another student, I'll be with you in a minute, just like they would in an office. So yeah, but you could put all that, I put all that on my syllabus, yes. Trying to see what other questions. I want to give you guys time to take a quick break if you're joining the next session. And the next session is with Dr. Gonzalo. Dr. Ana is a literacy associate professor, and she's going to be talking about assessment. And again, assessment in online is very different than how you might assess face-to-face. So one thing I do have learned is, again, when I was complaining about that huge project I gave them, I was so proud of it, and then I had to grade it. I made sure that at the end of the semester, when everything is going on, I don't assign anything, or I try to minimize, because I still assign some things that are open-ended. But if I'm giving some sort of big project, I try to put it towards more of like the middle, not towards the end of the, because then you have to grade, and mark everything by a certain date. So anything I do at the end, I generally do like multiple choice or things that Canvas or the online test will grade on its own. So I'm not going crazy. So I balance it out. Like I might have one class with a project and the other class with a final exam, because it'll take time. Any other questions? So if you have any other questions, I'll stay online for a few more minutes. I hope you'll join Dr. Gonzalo on the next session, and then Dr. Stacy will be talking about how, videos and online videos. So hope you'll join them, and I hope I'll meet many of you on face-to-face next time I'm in Belize. Thank you, guys.